Hey guys, today I wanted to do a tutorial for everyone who is a beginner or intermediate artist but still don't have very great art supplies yet. So I wanted to show you how to make a really cool painting using cheap acrylic paints. So pause the video, go check the description below for the material list, and then we'll get started. Right here, what I'm doing is taking my canvas and the ruler and then marking on the inch across the canvas on the top, on the bottom, and on both sides, and then connecting each dot line with a line to create a grid horizontally and vertically, creating a square cube grid. You guys know what I'm saying. I mean, you can see it. And once you're done with the grid, the purpose of the grid is it's going to help us create a proportionally accurate sketch, which is what we're all going to need in order to have a good foundation for a good underpainting and a good final painting. Now, right here you can see the reference photo that I've already printed out, and it is already gridded with an 8x8 grid to match the canvas. So this is important because then we're basically drawing all the shapes in each square. So each square will match up, like 2 squares over on the bottom has a line on it. I'm going to draw that line exactly the way it is in the reference photo. That is what you're going to do. And down in the description, I have the reference photo attached as well. I got it from Unsplash, which is a great place for creatives to find royalty-free photos for inspiration or to use in their creative practice. So shout out to Unsplash, not sponsored. So here you'll see me work on the sketch, and honestly I actually did the sketch before I even started filming, but then I had to take a blank canvas and start all the way over to show that I actually did the sketch. So that's what happened. So take some time. You're gonna want to, as you go through this tutorial, stop, pause the video, catch up with each step. So do the grid, do the sketch, and then we'll get into the painting. Here, the colors that I have, they're listed in the description, but I am taking the white and the pale blue and the gray and mixing them together to match the sky color. Now, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to go back over later with a layer to sort of give it a filmy, more depthy? Oh God. More dimensional look. Come on, guys. Jeez, don't judge me. Anyways, yes, we're going to be mixing up that color, and then that's the color we're going to start with to get a good block of color on there. And honestly, it takes the pressure off when you have such a huge chunk of space to paint one color, because you're like, yes, I'm halfway done with the painting. Next, you're going to end up taking the black and the gray, and we're basically going to then color block all of the darkest colors on our painting. So we're constantly looking at the reference photo, seeing which blocks, which shapes have the darkest shadows. We're mixing the black and the gray so that it's not a pure black, because in our photo there's not really any pure blacks. It's mostly a vintagey black, and by that I mean like a grayed out black. So that's why I'm adding the gray, but it doesn't have to be perfect. Like, this first layer of color that we're putting down is not meant to be perfectly perfect. It's not even meant to be perfectly color blocked in the areas. Like, it can look a little sketchy. That is completely fine. Now, don't take this out of hand. Like, you do want to be pretty precise, like get the shapes right, but it doesn't have to have clean edges. Don't worry about the clean edges, because we're going to blur all of them out in layers after this. We just want to block in the darkest shapes, the darkest colors, so that we can start building up the color on top of it. Something else I want you guys to know is it took me about 4 hours to finish this painting, start to finish, and I knew what I was doing as I was doing it. So if you are taking your time and it's a little bit slower, do not worry about it. This is obviously a shorter tutorial, and I've sped up parts of the process mostly so that it wasn't super mundane for people that don't actually want to do the tutorial but just sort of want to watch the process. So again, you're gonna need to stop the video to actually take your time to do each of these steps. And the steps we've gone over so far is the grid, the sketch, the blue of the sky, and then we're going over the darks. These are the parts that we want to get in our base painting. Now that I've finished with the darks, I'm gonna start adding in all of my oranges. There's a lot of orangey tones in here, and so honestly I'm gonna be mixing the orange with some of the black, with some of the gray, to create some of these like moodier offset oranges, rustic oranges. And I'm going to be piecing in the color. Again, do not worry about the colors being exact. We're going to be adjusting them with each layer. We just want to get the color in the right spots. So wherever you see orange bits, do the brighter oranges first with the pure orange color. And I'm taking some water so that I can water it down just a tiny bit. This first layer we do not want watered down a whole bunch, but I'm just using water to make it more malleable so that the paint moves around on the painting easier. So yes, piece in your orange. Here you can see I have lightened up the orange a little bit with the white to try to get a light orange or a creamy color for the less vibrant oranges. Or in this case, for this spot here, it's mostly white, and I'll continue to brighten that spot over the course of the painting. To create the bouquet, is that how you say it? Let me check. Let me look it up real quick. Ha! Nailed it. I just checked. It's called bouquet. Oh my god. So proud of myself. Anyways, bouquet is the out of focus. It's literally the out of focus aesthetic in photography. But it creates those little circular sunspots or like light bits. And to replicate that in paint, we want to make sure that as we put in these little spots everywhere, that we keep the circular shape to them. So don't just make giant blobs. Try to do everything in these tiny circular motions where we're layering circles on top of each other instead of just making one long shape. And that will give you more of the bouquet effect. Down here, this part actually confused me a little bit as I was, I guess maybe not confused, but it was a little trickier for me because the color is so interesting. It's like a very muddied, grayed out orange, but also browny. I don't know. But you'll see me tweak it as we go throughout the painting. I'm constantly like piecing in darks, piecing in lights, trying to get the mood right because it is very blurred out and out of focus. So throughout this painting, you're basically going to be tweaking those things. The darks, the lights, all the bits, going back and forth, trying to piece in the right colors, piece in the right shapes, and then getting the effect that you want. But this first layer, we're just focused mostly on color and shapes. Color less than shapes. Shapes are more important. So I call this time of painting, this layer of painting, basically color blocking. The underpainting for me is mostly about color blocking, where we get the sort of colors in the right places. See, I'm finishing up. I've used some of the gray mixed with the blue to create those more cool tone spaces of the piece. Now listen, because this is very important. Let this layer dry. It must be completely dry before you do this next part of the process. So stop and wait for it to completely dry, where if you touch it, it's not even cold from like dampness. It must be completely dry. It won't take long because it's acrylics. Just let it completely dry. Then what you're gonna do is spray some water or dip your paintbrush in a tiny bit of water. You don't want your brush dripping. You do not want your brush dripping. You just want it damp. And then mix some grayed out orange. So basically a flesh tone, very light flesh tone with that damp brush or water, and you're gonna do a film. So you're going to take that color and brush it over everything on the bottom portion of the painting you've already done. You want to basically unify all the colors you've already pieced down with that flesh tone, so everything sort of has a grain over it. Once you are done with that, you must let that dry as well. It has to be completely dry. This is the part where patience is key in painting. Then once that is completely dry, you are going to add the lights back in. So now you can see that I'm going in with literal white mixed in with a tiny bit of like that gray fleshy tone, and I am adding all of the lights back to the brightest parts of the painting, which are mostly those bokeh circles that are spotted around. Then, after that layer, wait for it to completely dry. We're going in for the top now. You're gonna do a tiny layer. When I say layer, that means that you are getting your brush damp, lightly damped, or spray a tad of water and then dip it in, and then put a thin layer of white mixed with the pale blue over the sky part already. You want to give the sky some depth, and you want to lighten it up and create more of an atmospheric vibe to the scene. Also, something that I'm doing over the edges where you can see the city part in the skyline, you're going to take that blue and cover the Eiffel Tower. That essentially will push it back into the distance. We want it to look far away, covered in fog. So you're going to put that light, translucent film of paint over those like areas on the top part. It is very important that you do all of these steps after everything underneath it is dry. The first layer, it's okay painting wet next to wet paint, but after that, with this style of painting, you have to wait for each layer to dry or you'll start peeling up paint underneath. Here I'm going back in with my darks. Since I've already added the lights back in, now I'm going in and darkening areas that got a little too light when I put those unifying films of color. And some of you might be confused, like, I just put the darks in, why am I making it lighter? This doesn't make sense. Essentially what you're doing is you're unifying the whole piece so that it doesn't look like you just did like a paint my number with like out of the box paints. You're elevating the painting by making it look like it is curated with paints that have been uniquely mixed just for this painting. Like, you are doing this work for a purpose. You want to give it an effect that looks mystical, translucent, all the vibes. So what I'm going to be doing the next couple layers is essentially going back and forth, adding the lights back in where the lights need to go, and then adding the darks back in where they need to go. And then after those layers of lights and dark have dried completely, then I start going back in with the orange and start putting a thin layer. All of these layers that I'm adding on top, they are mixed with water. They're going to be mixed with water because it's important that these are translucent layers, that you can see through them. They're very thin layers, which means that they'll dry quickly. That's awesome. And you are putting thin layers of the colors back over the lights and darks that you've already put in. So you'll see me adding the oranges back into the bottom part. You'll see me adding the oranges and the lights back into the bouquet circles mixed in onto the top. And then the last color that I end up introducing back in at the top layers is the blues and the greens that are mixed into the hues of the city. And some of you might go through the phase of thinking that maybe your first layer, like, you should have stopped at your first layer because you like had it right, you had pieced in the colors in the right spots and it just looked much better. But I promise, even though this painting will most likely go through many ugly phases and areas where you're like, man, it looked better than this, it's seen some better times, trust me, if you push it out through to the last product, the end product will look much better than that first layer that you put down of just pieced in, rough, etched in colors. Again, you can see that I'm adding the grays back in, trying not to go over any of my bright whites that I'm trying to keep, because all of my darks are essentially pushing the lights to the front, which is what I'm trying to do. Create the contrast between the light bits and the dark bits, and then unifying all the colors in between with those films that connect everything to one area, one environment. And as you'll go through this process, you'll see that maybe some of your shapes are not correct. Here, I'm trying to correct the shape of this orange blob of bouquets layered on top of each other, like those blurry circles. And so I'm taking the dark and reshaping those circles so that it looks more accurate to my reference photo. Because as I am painting, I'm literally referencing the photo with everything that I am putting down to make sure that I'm piecing these color values and these colors in the right spots. I darkened the foreground stairway patio, like overlooking patio. What do you call those? I don't know. And by darkening that, it pulls it back to the front. And I want you to know, the slower you take this process, the better it will be. If you actually take time, reference for your reference photo, piece in the colors and the values. I'm saying this over and over because it's so important. It's so important. Painting is not necessarily difficult if you take the time to problem solve what you're trying to communicate. And I think sometimes we can just rush it and then mix colors that shouldn't mix, or not wait for things to dry, and then things just get muddied and ugly. It's really easy to just go overboard. But it's also relatively easy to fix what you might be messing up to begin with. You just need to take the time to look at what you're doing and try to find a way to create a solution. Even if that means that you have to work 3 extra layers in to get the effect that you want. And remember, I am not adding any extra colors here. My palette is just the blue, the gray, the black, the white, the orange. I haven't even used the green yet. Oh, here it is. Speak of the devil. And I haven't actually used the yellow. The green I'm adding and mixing with the blue and the gray to create a very earthy green that's muted, so that I can make another translucent layer with water so it's transparent, and adding it again over dried areas of the painting. This is all dry on dry layer painting. We are waiting for each layer to dry, which is why it took me 4 hours. Not because it's necessarily difficult, but because there's a lot of dry waiting time in between. Many of you might be like, man, this is too sped up to actually follow. And I apologize for that. I feel like the amount of like tweaking I'm doing, I'm just watching it right now and I'm like, oh my god, this might overwhelm someone so much. But honestly, it's just me trying to match the reference photo. And I think starting with just an 8x8 canvas, that's small enough that it's not as overwhelming. And plus, half of that 8x8 canvas is just straight one color with one layer on top of it. So I mean, it's like half the overwhelm. It's very interesting to watch myself paint. I'm literally just staring at my editing program as it like speeds through this. It's weird doing it in real time because you don't know how it's gonna turn out, and then you watch it and then voila, there it is. That's what I came up with, and I think it's actually really fantastic for using like cheap acrylics. So I hope you guys let me know in the comments if you actually successfully were able to do this tutorial. If it's too fast, maybe I'll need to make a longer one next time. But I hope you guys had good luck through this process. So yeah, ciao.